Hi, my name is Simon Trezellian. My background, as many of you will know, is ex-intelligence and special forces, and now I'm an author, motivational speaker, and I would like to speak to you today about something I've seen on the net, and in fact you've probably, unless you've been sleeping under a rock for the last few days, that you have too, and that is this Kony 2012 campaign. Now, when I saw that, it looked like a great cause. I'd obviously been aware of child soldiers in Africa for some while. However, there's something fundamentally wrong, and I feel that I have a bit of an understanding as to why that is. But first of all, we need to go on a bit of a history lesson, because it's important to understand this concept of what I call the Bogeyman. Now, the Bogeyman has always been a concept used by the elite, the bankers and the government elite, to demonize certain individuals in order to get certainly the American populace on board to ratify the decisions of an Illuminati elite. So how can I qualify this? First of all, you need to look at the original Bogeyman, which of course was Adolf Hitler, which actually brought America into the war. Now, of course, every time that we talk about a Bogeyman, I'm also going to talk about the reason why as well, and it's always a fiscal reason, it's always a political and a financial position as well. Adolf Hitler, as you can imagine, was the first unifier for a lot of Europe, very negatively. And interestingly enough, that in 1936 the World Bank actually sponsored Adolf Hitler. Then the Americans came into the war, which has effectively finished the war, and after the war the Marshall Plan was initiated, in which case of course Germany was able to rebuild itself. All times the same money was coming from the same world banks. Once they got rid of Adolf Hitler, they needed a new Bogeyman in order to remain in Europe, because of course it was very lucrative for the big banks and the industries to be in Europe, and that's why the next Bogeyman that came along, of course, was Stalin. And we had Stalin, we had the Cold War, we had the Reds under the bed, McCarthy era, all of that type of thing to demonize this individual, who was a pretty bad person anyway, so not hard. And of course, after Stalin died, the next one, of course, we then had the Cuban Missile Crisis, because of course the Americans wanted Cuba, so they had to demonize someone else. His name was Khrushchev, and we had all of that nonsense with JFK, which unfortunately after that led us into the Vietnam War as well, which was America's first foothold on Asian soil. Now, after that, they needed a new Bogeyman, and that came very easily in the form of Gaddafi. And Gaddafi was one of the first, true modern-day Bogeymen, if you like, until he largely became neutralized, and only just recently, obviously, has been killed as part of the Arab Spring. Now, after Gaddafi was largely neutralized, certainly after the Lockerbie bombing, we then, of course, had the aspect of the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah in Iran, that was actually, quite a big one. Of course, we had the Arms for Iran fiasco with Ollie North. So again, we got Iran with one of the biggest oil reserves in the world. So one of the reasons that, of course, we were after the Ayatollah. Now, after the Ayatollah, then the next Bogeyman. We've got to remember that there's only one per time. You can't have more than one Bogeyman, because you can't get the American populace to focus on more than one. So then they had Saddam Hussein, and of course we had the Iraq-Iran war, basically starting to show us that there was a massive need to secure the area, to of course secure oil prices. So Saddam actually went a little bit quiet after that, and that's when we first started to bring out Osama bin Laden, not in an Al-Qaeda sense, but in an Afghanistan sense. Of course, we had all the issues with the Taliban and major things like that. Now, when you understand where the Russian oil line goes, and I'll speak about that probably in another video, you'll understand why all the wars are fought. Now, after Osama bin Laden, there was a bit of a quiet thing, so then they had to get American troops, or rather UN troops, NATO troops, into the Balkans. This was basically to shore up what they call the wings of NATO, after Turkey showed itself, a big Muslim nation, was not necessarily going to be the most reliable. So essentially what happened then, of course, is that the next Bogeyman, of course, was Slobodan Milosevic, and this is where we had the Bosnian campaign, the Kosovan campaign, the bombing of Serbia, and of course the shoring up, making sure that there were 50,000 NATO troops then placed in the Balkans. Now after Milosevic died in The Hague, they needed a new bogeyman. That's when they brought Saddam Hussein back out again. Saddam Hussein, as always, an old CIA agent. His officers were trained by British intelligence and American intelligence. And of course they gave him the go-ahead to walk into what they called South Iraq, in Kuwait. And that's of course what started the Gulf War and started the American military presence in the Gulf. Now, as we know, Saddam Hussein died as well, so you need a new bogeyman. New bogeyman, of course, we've already got Osama bin Laden in the wings. Another CIA stooge, is why you couldn't actually find him within sort of 30 square miles of rough country, even with a $20 million price on his head. So Osama bin Laden is brought out. We then had the nonsense of 9/11 as well, which again creating massive fear with the American public. It's taken us a while to get Osama bin Laden, and of course during this time, especially when the elections are on, always good to actually get a victory, and Osama bin Laden was taken out of the game, which allowed us then the next phase as to who do we go for now. If you notice, there hasn't been any terrorist incidents since Osama bin Laden went down, so how do we actually fixate the populace on the next bogeyman? Well, of course, when you actually look at the Russian pipeline, starts off in a little place called Chechnya, goes through to Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan, into Kurdistan, of course, and Afghanistan, into Iraq, and then into Iran. So Iran's the next one. This is why you've been hearing lots of Ahmadinejad and Iran's nuclear ambitions to basically demonize him as well. And he's getting another easy target to demonize. So this is why there's all this sword rattling at the moment in regards to Iran, which will be one of the next parts of the war. Now, that's largely gone quiet. They've given it over to the Israelis to see what they're going to do. So now we're actually minus a bogeyman. But of course we've been looking now at, they've seen all these bogeymen that they've been able to use, like Noriega down in South America, to get a really good military presence in all of these countries. So now we have NATO, UN and American troops in Afghanistan and Iraq, throughout the whole of the Gulf. We got them in the Balkans, we got them in South America. And one place that we actually haven't got them at the moment, also we've got them in Australia as well as of next year. But the only one that we haven't really got, of course, is Africa. Africa has largely been the sway of the European nations. The Dutch, the French, the Germans, the British, all have had their colonies there. And of course, when you look at Africa, it's the richest nation in regards to minerals. What's happening in Australia at the moment? The reason that we've been able to get out of the GFC is largely because of our mineral wealth. So everyone's looking around for mineral wealth now, not oil wealth. Mineral wealth is the biggest in Africa, and of course it's the most destabilized place in the world. But it's the one place that the Americans never really got to. They went to Somalia, that didn't work out so well. So now they have to get American troops on the ground in Africa. What better way to use the internet to actually demonize a new guy? He's been around for 26 years, so he's not a new guy. This guy Kony. There will be American demand to put troops on the ground in Africa, right next door to where a lot of the mineral wealth is. So you can anticipate there's going to be a lot more of the warlords. I mean, no one really went after Idi Amin and a lot of the other major ones. In fact, most of them actually run countries now. Look at Mugabe. No one's actually done much to him. But of course now you've got this massive viral campaign against Kony. This will actually start a new war which will be on African soil, which will actually be to do with determining troops from the UN being in Africa in order to secure mineral wealth, which is the new wealth of the world. That's my prediction. I believe that the Kony phenomena will actually be shown to possibly be a scam. It will probably be shown to be largely false and manipulated by unseen forces in order to demonize a new person. This is what happens, unfortunately, people. We fall for it all the time. You can be aware. What we can now use is use the internet to actually get information, to be able to become more aware and understand what is really going on in our world. I'll make a couple more videos like this, basically to show you what's really going on. My book, The Order of the Nephilim, will be coming out this year, which actually illustrates all of these things. It's going to be a bit of a game changer, and it will actually start to change the way people look at the world. So if you want to get in touch with me, email me at simon@starfireaustralia.com. This is Simon Trezelyan speaking from the Gold Coast,